In today's video, we're going to be diving in to the upcoming pattern where we're going to be discussing very major cold air that is heading into the eastern and central United States overall through the medium and long range. We really don't know when the end of this cold air is going to be. Obviously, January has already shaped up to be very cold through the 12th, but now we see a lot more of that coming up soon. So very, very likely January is going to end up being a severely cold month once we look back at it. Other than that, we also have numerous East Coast potential major snowstorms, even blizzards that could perhaps happen along the eastern seaboard, even the southeast coast that we need to discuss today. We saw a little bit of this yesterday, but now we have the GFS model and the European model showing eerily similar East Coast major snowstorms. Again, even blizzards. It's hard to predict what the wind would be like in the long range in these types of scenarios, but the snowfall would be incredibly heavy if we did see this verify. And there is a handful of them, in some of these models, 2, 3, 4 potential snowstorms over the next 2 weeks. So activity looks to increase majorly. Now, I wanted to ask you guys a question. I've been thinking about this lately before we get into it. So comment down below. This is a bit of a poll, but do you like us, presenting the climate prediction center outlooks like we're doing here, the 6 to 10 day outlook, the 8 to 14, the weekly and the monthly outlooks? We can keep doing that for the future videos, or do you guys kind of prefer it without? Because it does take up a few minutes at the beginning of the video. So let me know. Basically, keep it or leave it out of the videos for the most part, unless it's extremely relevant. But I'd like to make it a pretty common thing on the channel if you guys would like that, because of course it's about what you guys want more than anything. So let's dive into things. Take a look here at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. And if you remember, this one didn't look too cold just yesterday for the 17th through 21st time frame, but once we take it from the 18th through the 22nd, it looks severely cold, especially across the central states. But a lot of this would likely by the 20th timeframe be spreading much further eastward, and there will be colder times along the west. And this has to be the first time in a very long time that we've seen an outlook like this one from the Climate Prediction Center. So almost the entire United States, at least continental United States, under below average temperatures. Absolutely crazy stuff. And again, this could be a potential polar vortex event for these areas in the north central states, talking about very cold compared to normal, historically cold in some cases. So not only that, very cold temperatures on the way, but we see a much more favorable pattern for snowfall actually from the Climate Prediction Center setting up. It looks like a lot of these storms could originate from the Gulf in here and move up into the eastern states, whether that's onshore or offshore. The onshore ones would bring more inland snowfall, of course, to these areas here, present risks of snowfall, at least. And the coastal ones would, of course, present snowfall risk to the coastal areas. So that's the difference there. But in the first 12 days of January, we've had very cold temperatures, as we've mentioned, but it has not been the most stormy pattern. This second half of January looks to be very different from that, as we see the below average temperatures move in, potentially even colder than what we saw in the beginning of January. But not only that, above average precipitation coupled up with that. And I cannot wait to see what this pattern brings, because it looks very good for cold and snow. We also see some drier areas across the Midwest. It's kind of interesting. These areas are like stacked up, but we also see an above average precipitation area for the Rockies and Plains. We've seen this a lot so far over the last couple of weeks. And then the West Coast remains fairly dry through the 18th into the 22nd. Here's the 8 to 14 day outlook. And again, it does move eastward after the 20th. So this outlook would cover the 20th through the 26th here. And we see that this does show the colder temperatures being spread a lot further eastward for the most part. So a lot of the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, South Central states, Great Lakes in the heart of the cold once we move past the 20th time frame is what the current expectation would be. With the warmest looking area being the West Coast, although it doesn't even look very warm there either. As we look at the precipitation, we see we continue looking favorable, maybe not as favorable as the 6 to 10 day outlook, but it still appears likely that lows will likely be forming in the Gulf of Mexico. And from there, again, moving up into the mid-Atlantic regions, if not offshore. This one definitely looks offshore. And we're going to be showing you a storm that both models have during this time frame, especially the beginning half of this, so just after the 20th. That would bring massive snow totals to some of these areas. And really, from what I've seen, it could extend into some of the Gulf states again, like we've been seeing up into the mid-Atlantic. So very interesting. Another potential deep south snowstorm, and this one looks like it would pack a punch. Just get ready, guys. As we look at the 3 to 4 week outlook, it has not changed. This is the 25th through the 7th of February. We see colder temperatures extending from the plains down through the eastern states. It seems like they become a lot more confident in cold temperatures, so I suspect that if this was made on the 12th instead of the 10th, they likely would be showing even colder conditions in the east. And I can't confirm that, but it seems like they've started to move in that direction. Also, above normal temperatures in the west definitely leans towards cold in the east. So that's their overall outlook. Above normal temperatures in the east as well during this time frame, which seems to be the trend. We haven't seen a real date where we're going to see us transition into above average in the northwest. I'm sure that the reason they put this is just because we're in a La Nina, so it's kind of always going to lean that way as far as probabilities go, but I feel like this time around the west is staying dry, at least for the next little while, so I wonder if this will end up verifying or not. As we take a look at the monthly outlook, it looks fairly similar to what we've seen. Cold in the southeast in particular, but for the majority of the east here, and then also the northern plains and upper Midwest, and then warm for a majority of the west here. So this is, I think, a great outlook. Precipitation wise, not so great. We've seen drier conditions here, but I think that's the only area that likely will end up verifying. I think we'll have above average here, below average for most of here, and then below average probably for the New England area as well, unless we start getting storms moving way up the coast, which as of now hasn't really shown up yet. When we look at the past 10 days of temperatures, we see that it looks very similar to their January outlook. Cold, particularly in the southeast, with the cold originating from the northern plains and upper Midwest. I mean, that is picture perfect. And then warmth for a lot of the west. So this looks almost identical, like I mentioned, to that January outlook from the Climate Prediction Center, so gets an A+ from me. When we look at the European model, again, both models are going to show a massive southeast and mid-Atlantic snowstorm, but both models are also going to have additional snowfall events outside of that major one as well. But it's striking the similarity with that southeast one, so pay close attention. Today was quite cold along the east, but believe it or not, it's been milder than it has been. So we've seen a milder push, although it's still below normal temperatures for the majority of these areas. It's far below average for a lot of the west and central states here, as we have an Arctic kind of blast moving down into these areas. Even some snowfall showers across the Great Lakes, upper Midwest, and the Rockies. As we move towards tomorrow on Monday the 13th, what we see is a lot of this energy begins to move through the southeast. This is the one that I've been talking about a little bit, where I was like, if it just trends north, we could see something come out of this for areas across perhaps the Ohio Valley and Mid-Atlantic, but it never really came together. You know, I wasn't ever really calling for that to happen if you guys watched the videos, but I was just kind of curious about it, and I have seen things like this trend in a snowier direction. It's hard to do this because on one hand, you're looking at what the models are showing as a snowstorm and considering that as a possibility, but you have to kind of be able to see what the models aren't showing as snow, but kind of know in the back of your head that it could become snow very easily on these models. So that was one of those scenarios. Not that it had a better than 50% chance of happening at any point, but it was something that I was monitoring. That threat has basically completely almost dissipated at this point. By the time we look at Tuesday on the 14th, the cold is for the most part returned to the east. It's not the most severe in the world, but we see a lot of this mostly for the upper Midwest and Great Lakes, and then for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast here, with even some lake effect snow showers occurring. Also, some of them aren't lake effect, and I'm sure they're lake enhanced in here, but we do see some snowfall across eastern Canada, areas throughout the Northeast as well, just some spotty snow showers. We see by Wednesday, it's a lot of the same, fairly quiet. I think the biggest piece of information here is that we have another Gulf system beginning to develop here off of Texas. And if you've been paying very close attention, this is how a lot of our storms lately have started out. And according to the Climate Prediction Center, this is how a lot of our storms are still going to be developing throughout the majority of the rest of January. So we'll watch this very closely as we move towards Thursday, the 16th, and it hasn't really moved We still continue to see cold throughout a lot of the east, but there is a warm push occurring where we have this warm up in the west, but it's spreading eastward here for this 16th time frame. Again, a lot of energy here. If there was a pattern where the jet stream was like this, we would likely see it latch on to that jet stream, and that's when you would see, potential snowfall in this area. I'm just unsure if this is even one of those, and sure enough, it really isn't. It does eventually move up. By the time we're looking at Friday, it's clear that this is going to be a pretty substantial thunderstorm event. Again, Friday the 17th. Thunderstorms, potential severe weather in here. The jet stream is way to the north, so we're not seeing any snowfall in that just yet. We do see the Northern Rockies seeing some snowfall. Also, pretty substantial low across portions of Canada between the Great Lakes and the Hudson Bay, which, as you know, usually brings on some cold weather. So let's see what happens by the time we're reaching the 18th. And it looks like the cold is, in fact, moving in. A lot of your Gulf energy moved northward and then eastward. So we've seen this really spread in some thunderstorms and showers throughout the southeast and mid-Atlantic. Potential snowfall for especially the mountainous northeast. And then right on our doorstep is a pretty massive cold blast that is moving in by Saturday the 18th. It's worth noting that the 16th through 18th here featured a lot of warmth and humidity moving up the southeast coast. So a lot warmer, obviously the 18th being stormy, but perhaps the 16th and 17th would be a great time to get outdoors and enjoy it, because the rest of January looks very, very cold, and who knows when the next warm up will come. So Thursday, Friday, 16th, 17th could be really, really nice days to get out there, especially if there's no storminess in your area quite yet. A lot of those days where it's warm in the winter do tend to be windy, so keep that in mind, but should be nicer temperatures than what we've been seeing. As we move towards let's not get ahead of ourselves. So I guess I missed something here, because we have this piece of energy in the Rockies. It moves very quickly here. Snowfall across Wyoming, Colorado, and surrounding states. And this is going to want to just kind of wrap around. And this does bring some pretty intense snowfall as this jet stream gets really, really moving towards the south. Look at how rapidly we're moving in. This is 1 a.m. on Sunday. Here is 7 a.m. and we get this low that has basically moved from the Rockies around the jet stream and is now over like the Smoky Mountains there of Tennessee and North Carolina. We begin to get snowfall here across the Ohio Valley and Appalachian Mountain Range. Still some showers and thunderstorms in the southeast. This does get steered offshore by this jet stream towards offshore of the mid-Atlantic, and this is where things start to intensify with some snowfall. It's very quick moving, but West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Northern Virginia, DC, and Maryland get some snowfall here around Sunday the 19th if this model is correct. That does move up into some areas that really have been lacking for snowfall, like New York City, northern New Jersey, into eastern PA, southern New England with a coastal low here. This could be a quick plowable snowfall event that would certainly satisfy some of you guys' hunger and thirst for this snowfall. I'm sure it wouldn't completely satiate you guys, but I'm sure it would help out a little bit. Again, that is 7-ish days out, so we're going to still take it with a grain of salt, but could be good news for you guys. The cold is almost certain, and with the look for above normal precipitation, I'm sure we're going to see some stuff come together, such as what we're seeing here between the 20th and 21st. That'll be Monday, Tuesday. We see another bout of precipitation and energy overall trying to form over that western Gulf of Mexico, and this has been a really, really common thing. By this point, this is number 2 on the model run, but as far as the month of January and what's happened already, I would say this is probably like number 4 of all the storms that have formed right in this area. So this has been a really, really trend we've been stuck in. And with the jet stream's current steering, you could tell that we are very cold in the southeast, and this is going to move pretty well to the south. So we get some snowfall already going for Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, kind of reminiscent of our previous winter storm. And we see by the time we reach Tuesday afternoon, we're really going with, or we'll look at the 1 p.m. time frame, so really early afternoon. We see Texas getting going with some moderate to heavy snowfall here. Your mixing line is along the Gulf Coast there, and this isn't unheard of, but this is very, very intense and very far to the south, and it's pretty close to 10 days out. So please, please, please don't take this as a forecast or as gospel. I can already see it now, people in the comments calling me crazy for forecasting this. It's never a forecast. It's just, we're doing model analyzing here. We're just looking at what the models are showing, going over it. I didn't draw this map. This is the world famous European model. Everybody's using it. So I want to put that out there. But we see the low forming here. It's showing some unusual stuff. But with the amount of cold we have forecasted, I wouldn't be surprised if a freezing line in a storm would be that far south. It's more of a question of will the storm be there or not. I think the cold will. But Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, another very far deep south snowstorm. Again, not unheard of. People treat this type of stuff as if it's impossible. Nothing's impossible in weather, but this is certainly something we've seen before. It's just, once every 10, once every 20 years, something like this will occur. I want to move forward a little later in the afternoon because by the time we're reaching, well, better yet, this is 1 a.m. as we're moving into Wednesday the 22nd. We see a lot of this low pressure is nearby Florida. It's pretty broad, but it's in there. We see a lot of freezing rain for the Florida Panhandle into southern Alabama, southern Georgia, southern South Carolina. This would be devastating. Not only the snowfall in the deep south, but the heavy freezing rain here in areas far to the south. This would be hard to get to happen, even harder than snowfall, because for freezing rain to occur, you need that ground to be frigid and the air to be frigid. Is it impossible? Again, nothing's impossible in weather, but I think that having actual freezing rain accumulating in these areas would take a very, very specific set of weather events, such as frigid temperatures beforehand, well below freezing, and not getting above freezing just before this occurs. A little far-fetched, certainly not impossible, but the snowfall is much more possible. And we start to see it spreading still through the Gulf states, but now we're seeing the Smoky Mountains again, Carolinas again, and into Southern Virginia. This is like a weather dream for me, not the super impactful stuff, but as far as what's happening in southeastern Virginia in particular, this would be a weather dream for me. Looks like a heavy snowfall event if it occurred this way. Again, don't get your hopes super high up because there's a lot of time to go. We look at 12Z here, which is 7 a.m. It gets really heavy along the Carolina coast and Virginia, never really becoming a super strong low. And that actually helps with these coastal areas. You might think that you would want a much stronger low, but when these lows get super strong, that's when you get the warm air intruding in the middle layers of the atmosphere, and that's when you get a lot of sleet and mixing for areas closer to the storm. But because this low is so weak, it's allowing for that rain snow line to be way further to the south and east here in this instance, and that's what allows for this snowstorm to even be possible. We see the Carolinas, Virginia, Delmarva, southern New Jersey, Maryland, D.C. getting crushed here by Wednesday the 22nd. It's still going by the time we're moving overnight into Thursday the 23rd, and then it's all said and done right here. Again, take it with a grain of salt. I think my overall views on this is that we're like 10 days out, and we've seen the models show things like this very recently this year, where they show it in the long range. It kind of flip-flops, goes away for a time even, and then comes back within 5 days of it occurring. Wouldn't be surprised to see that happen. Wouldn't be surprised to see this trend eastward offshore either, to where nobody gets snow. That is still a very possible scenario. So this isn't a guaranteed snowstorm to happen by any means. Even if we're loosening up and saying, we don't know where it could occur, but it's going to happen. Nothing like that even. It could move all the way offshore and not even occur. Also, maybe the most popular scenario would be for it to trend northward, and maybe instead of these areas seeing the majority of the snowfall, it's much more like these areas here. Northern trends are classic in weather like this with the models over time. So because we have a lot of time, would not be surprised whatsoever to see a northern trend with this storm. And I know people are like, well, you mean anything can happen? Obviously, we have some information here, so it's not just a total guess, but we're confident that there will be some development in the Gulf. Very likely that'll move towards the southeast coast. It's just, will it be offshore, very close to the coast, or onshore? There's a few scenarios there, but because we're talking about 10 days out, 9 days out, you have to kind of leave all those options on the table because it's not perfect. Everybody knows that. It should be obvious. It's not perfect. We really need to refine the details over the coming days and even, week plus. So there's a long time to go, but the potential is increasing for this time frame, certainly. As we keep going, I think it's interesting. By Thursday the 23rd, a day later, look at the Gulf. Activity starting to get going again, and we kind of have this trough peaked over the west. but we still have a jet stream that's pretty healthily far to the south, very close to the storm. So this one would also, in this scenario, likely get pulled right into that jet stream and move along it. Again, if our jet stream was, let's say, really far to the north like this, and your storm is moving through here, that's a far way to go to get into those strong jet stream winds. Sometimes it does still get pulled into it and you know, track to the north and meet up with it. But other times it gets kind of just left behind and fizzles out here because it just can't get latched on. So the jet stream's really close. That is what you want to see for a storm to get dragged through. And what we're going to see is some more ice in the deep south here. It gets latched onto that jet stream, and this one moves through the southeast. This is a more onshore scenario. Again, we're looking at Sunday the 26th now, and this one kind of just moves up northward towards the Smoky Mountains, and it's going to want to bring some interior snowfall as we have some fresh, frigid air moving in from Canada once again, and that one becomes a major snowstorm as well before moving out. And pretty fittingly, what we see for the end of this looks very similar to a lot of what the Climate Prediction Center is showing. Positive P&A, warmer temperatures over the southwest, in other words. Colder temperatures spreading in through the north central states and into a lot of the east here. That is a really classic wintertime look that is a very wintry one for snow and cold and all things like that. So let's take a look at the GFS again. We're going to see some striking similarities, but we're also going to see some differences. So let's just work our way through it. Again, that first little Gulf system just slides off really innocently. We start to see some activity right around Saturday the 18th time frame. It's nowhere near identical to the European model, but we do get this kind of swing around with the energy around that jet stream. We start to get some snowfall for the Midwest, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic here by Saturday the 18th. As we keep going, it's a little transient, but we see it sit around the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, and we actually do get a pretty good interior snowfall event there for the 18th, 19th, 20th. We move past this one, and then this is the strikingly similar one, that big time southeast one. We start to get the energy growing here for the Gulf of Mexico, right around Tuesday the 23rd, very early. Again, your jet stream almost moving through the storm, so it's already kind of latched on as it's even just forming. We don't get as much snowfall for Texas, Louisiana, and the deep south, but as this moves off the southeast, we get this low really forming here. Cold air is deep diving southward across these areas. And we end up getting a really decent North Carolina into the southern mid-Atlantic snowfall event here for Tuesday the 21st into Wednesday the 22nd. Even stretching northward, this one looks very close to wanting to just move straight up the coast. But we see areas like New Jersey, southern New England getting some snowfall from this, a little bit more than the European model. We'll look at total snowfall in a little bit, so stay tuned for that. But let's move past this storm. Similarly to the European model, the day following, we already have development starting for the Western Gulf again. We have a very healthy, warm west with this cold in the east look. Very brutal cold, actually, in the east. And we get another deep south snowstorm occurring in the southeast for South Carolina, North Carolina, southeast Virginia again. What's better than one snowstorm? Two, I guess. So as we move through, we get a little less cold here in the long range. We get a Midwest, Great Lakes, and Northeast snowstorm around the 27th, 28th. You're going to want to take it with a grain of salt. But in addition to this, we have a strong low here, cold front dragging. We get this severe weather possibilities here for the deep south into portions of kind of like Kentucky, Tennessee there. So we'll be watching. I think both models had a severe weather threat, but I think they're on different dates. So models still kind of flirting with some thunderstorm activity throughout the next couple of weeks and, you know, even severe weather. So we're going to have to watch it very, very closely. Here's the total precipitation on your European model over the next, I guess, 14 days or so. And we see that this area from the Gulf directly through the southeast is the highlight region. So we could tell this is your primary storm track over the next 2 weeks is going to be this Gulf straight through the southeast or even offshore of the southeast look. And this is going to bring about multiple snowfall threats. As you know, if there was no cold air, it wouldn't, but we're really expecting some brutal cold air. So when you match this up with that, that's your two puzzle pieces. Now we just have to figure out the fine details of when some storms will occur, how much will occur, and exactly where that's going to occur. And that's why you should subscribe and keep up to date with us, because over the coming days, we are going to be figuring all of that out. It's so exciting. Here's the anomalies, and I mean, it really just reflects that. Below average almost everywhere but the southeast here, unless you're in like a little bit of the Rockies here or the Great Lakes. We see the biggest area with above average precipitation is surely this southeast corridor straight from the Gulf. We can just tell what the storm track is right there looking at this. Total snowfall looks alarmingly huge. Again, that is a massive deep south snowfall event. Wouldn't be surprised to see a trend north. Wouldn't be surprised to see a trend offshore. All sorts of things can change with this, but as of now, we've seen models flirting with this idea. Not this one, but the GFS model for 2 days now. And now this one's on board, and they're both in agreement. And we have about 9 days to go, so there's going to be a lot of tracking to do. But deep south, Gulf states, deep southeast into some of the southern mid-Atlantic could be in for a big-time snowstorm if this is correct. Also, the northeast, as we get 2 snowstorms up here, they get multiple feet of snowfall for a lot of these areas. And then the Rockies really stepping it up with higher amounts of snowfall. And then, believe it or not, in a La Nina, the Cascades are looking at almost no snowfall over the next 14 days. The Sierra Nevada, literally almost no snowfall. So very crazy. Let's zoom into the southeast here to get some numbers on screen. Keep in mind that not all of this would accumulate, especially if you're in the very far southern corridor of the storm as mixing occurs. But we're talking about potentially 10 inches plus for Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas after they just had storms, some snowfall. The deeper south, like Gulf states into the southeast, we're talking about 10 inches back here, maybe even 15, 20 for the Carolinas. And then that also extends up into the southern mid-Atlantic like Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, areas like that. Very snowy look. Even maybe close to 2 feet near Raleigh. Obviously, that's a very long shot to verify, but just shows you how extreme this look is from the model. Not to say it's a forecast or that it's accurate at all, but crazy to see. When we look at the GFS snowfall amounts, we see that the tilt is a little bit different, and obviously we're missing our western half of this storm on this model. But for the Carolinas and southern mid-Atlantic, this does look pretty eerily similar. Also, the interior mid-Atlantic and northeast, seeing a very healthy 1 to 2 feet, maybe more for the Great Lakes on this model as well. Similarly, the Rocky Mountains are looking great. Cascades and Sierra Nevada, not so great. As we zoom into the southeast, look at that. Eerily similar for these areas, at least. Perhaps close to 2 feet. North Carolina, Virginia, same exact corridor. I'll move us back. Let me take a look at the European model zoomed in look. And I guess it's off by maybe, what, 50 miles? But that is impressive to see. Here we go. Similar amounts in a kind of similar area there. Obviously, the European model is a lot more expansive with it, but the GFS model might be higher with the amounts and a little bit more concentrated. Crazy stuff here. Let's take a look at the temperature pattern according to the European model, which will end up being the colder of the 2 models, as it's tended to be actually throughout January. If anything, it's maybe overdone it a little bit throughout January, so take that information and do with it what you will, but you never know when it will be correct, though. We're colder, and we're going to stay colder for a lot of the east until we're talking about the 16th, 17th time frame, when we do start to warm up to more neutral temperatures to even slightly above for a time. That's right before on the 19th where we start to see this massive and very intense Arctic invasion just move in. Polar vortex event is what I would describe this as. We're looking at up to 60 degrees below normal somewhere in here. So a lot of 30, 40, 50 degrees below normal, which is in like very historically rare territory for many of these areas. Even talking about, 20, 30 degrees below normal for areas in the deep south. So very cold around that 19th through like 21st 22nd time frame, and we actually get a lot of those pinks looking at 62.3 degrees below normal for somewhere in here just a few days later, so highly below normal. And I want to take a look at the actual temperatures here just to give you guys an idea for what this would actually mean. And the greens here are below zero. These are sub-zero temperatures, and we see very expansive areas of that moving far into the deep south. We're seeing Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, Western North Carolina seeing below zero temperatures, even coastal Virginia, coastal North Carolina. This might be overdone, to say the least. That is highly below normal temperatures, almost unheard of for many of these areas. We do get a lot milder as we push past the 25th into the 27th, but I say that because we were looking at, 40, 50, 60 degrees below normal. And now we're back to a measly 10, 20, 30 degrees below normal, which in most winters would be far below normal, but when you were just looking at temperatures twice as cold, it's hard to call this super, super cold, but it really still is here towards the end of the model run. And again, positive PNA set up here. It's a very good sign for cold and snow in the east. That stands for Pacific North American Oscillation, by the way, and all that means is warm along the west. It's a big player that causes cold air to move eastward, and we've seen it really, really pan out here throughout this year over and over and over again. Quickly, let's take a look at the GFS model's temperatures as well. Again, a little less intense with it. We do see that the 16th, 17th, we do warm up, and it's a little bit more intense on this model. We see that by the 19th, the entire East Coast is a little warmer. Right before we get intense cold moving in, but we can tell those pinks are not as expansive. We're mostly seeing blues and greens, which again are still 15, 20, 25 degrees below normal, even 30 degrees below normal, but it's not that record smashing cold temperatures that the European model just showed. Maybe this is more realistic. I would lean this way just because when you see the very far extremes popping up, it's important to be a little bit skeptical. I think that this is probably more on par with what you would expect to see. When we do end the model run, though, we do see a little bit of a difference here. We see warm along the East Coast. It looks like this cold is pushing it out as we're looking at it here. We do have warmth along the west, which would point towards that, but not quite as good as the end of the European model runs look here on the GFS. But, 384 hours out could be a little off, if you know what I mean. So, anyway, that's it for this video, guys. Again, be sure to subscribe. We're going to be really breaking all of this down over the coming days. I can't wait to do it with you guys and just figure out what's going to happen here. I'm sure that we're going to have one, if not two, maybe more major snowstorms to track in the eastern states over the coming weeks. So I'm super, super stoked for all of that. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.